Hello everyone, I'm Chloe Johnson and welcome to this fresh business thinking webinar series, Lockdown Learning for Businesses, supported by BT. BT Skills for Tomorrow aims to empower businesses and their employees with the digital skills to help grow their business. The Skills for Tomorrow website includes free learning content that small businesses and their employees can access at any time on topics such as promoting your business with online advertising, making sure your customers can find you online, and much more. To find out more, you can click on the link in the comments. Coronavirus has been a real challenge for small businesses and entrepreneurs across the UK. At Fresh Business Thinking, we're used to putting on events, sharing expertise, and encouraging and supporting networking. Throughout the pandemic, we knew this simply couldn't just stop. Perhaps more than ever, this is a time when as a business community, we need to come together and support one another. And we're lucky enough to work with organisations and individuals who are passionate about supporting entrepreneurs during this time. One of those is our speaker today, Dr. Lalita, award-winning performance-led psychologist who works with leaders, professionals, and business owners. Lalita identifies and redesigns the subconscious mind that drives 95% of behaviours to inspire a new way of living, away from self-doubt to inner peace, joy, and authenticity. Dr. Lalita will help you master your emotions to be able to effectively lead your team and make rational decisions to benefit the success of your company. Dr. Lalita will be talking for around 40 minutes and then we'll have some time for a Q&A. If you do have any questions, you can leave them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and we'll do our best to get to them later on in the session. That's all from me for now and I'll pass over to you, Dr. Lalita. Oh, you're on, there we go.
Am I on? I've muted myself now so I can actually talk to you guys. So hi everyone. My name is Dr. Lalita, and today I'm going to be speaking just around how we can manage our inner critic, just so our emotions don't overpower us and take over, and it prevents us from making choices that will actually benefit us. So as Chloe said, any questions or anything, I'll be able to answer at the end. But what I've done is I've put together a presentation, and I'm just going to be going through this today. So, how many of you have had a thought that has stopped you from doing something, and then after you've just kicked yourself for not doing it? So there's many people that will come to me, they're like, oh, that stopped me, or the thought of not being good enough, that stopped me from doing this task that I wanted to do. And often it's like, well, why does this happen? Why is it that we often have this sort of thought process in the background, or what we call an inner critic going on in the background? So that's what we'll be discussing today, just understanding it a little bit more. So what you tell yourself every day will either lift you or tear you down. And in some ways, I thought these images were very powerful because we have thoughts such as, I can't do this, or I'm not worthy, I must be perfect, I must not make a mistake, I'm not good enough, nobody loves me. But also this can be happening at a subconscious level. So you might not even be aware of these thoughts because you keep yourself so busy because you don't want to understand what these thoughts actually mean, because they feel very overwhelming. And there's also this image here of it's almost like your inner critic coming out and saying all these different things to you. And sometimes we can keep ourselves so busy in working, in the working life or in our personal lives, that we don't get to just understand what our inner critic is saying. And what I've found is during this period of COVID, more and more people are coming to me and saying, I've been lost in my own thoughts, I've been stuck in my own thoughts, and I don't know what to do about it, because they've had so much time to just think. So the aims of today is to understand what the inner critic is and to develop practical tips to manage your emotions and just to overcome self-doubt so you can reach the top of your game and be the most authentic person that you can be for yourself at this time. So what is the inner critic? So people always say, like, what is the inner critic? Why do we use, or where does this term originate from? So the inner critic, it refers to an inner voice that judges and criticizes a person, whether or not the self-criticism is objectively justified. And a highly active inner critic can take a toll on one's emotional well-being and self-esteem. And if, for example, that inner critic is having that impact on your self-esteem or emotional well-being, that then plays out in your behaviors in everyday life. And I'll go into more detail into how that actually operates. So, why do I need to manage my inner critic? So there's a really good picture here as well, again. So being an effective individual in business, as a professional, is just essential for professional and personal growth. As a leader, it's crucially important for you to develop your own growth mindset and approach to lead both yourself and others. And this is especially sort of important during these times right now, more than ever before. So why we need to manage the inner critic is that so it just doesn't take over. It doesn't overwhelm us. It doesn't prevent us from seeing what's truly in front of us, because we're managing that there's this other inner critic within us, but we're managing and understanding it. So we're not avoiding it. We're choosing to manage it. Now, the next thing is what actually makes a good leader, or what makes a good professional. So there's all these different words here. There's compassion, integrity, empathy, passion, decisiveness, courage, clarity, communication, being a good influencer, being strong, being positive, being loyal, having knowledge, being habitual, being focused, having a vision, being motivated, and being effective. So there's just so many words there, isn't there? And that can often just put pressure on any individual, because it's like, I need to be all these things. And what we see is we see in other people, well, they're more compassionate, or they're like that. And that can also then really beat us up, because it's like, I'm not like that, or why can't I be like that? So we end up putting all this pressure on ourselves. And often it's the inner critic that's looking and observing other people and saying, look how compassionate they are, or look at them, they get their vision, they're so focused, they're so determined. And by doing that, it's acknowledging the traits in other people, but also belittling yourself by constantly just criticizing yourself for what you are and not being able to see the good and the traits that you bring. So what do these words actually mean? So when we even look at all these different words, like compassion, what compassion means to me will be very different to what it means to everyone else that I will speak to, because we all have our own experiences of what compassion means. And we're not talking about like the dictionary terminology. We're talking about what you actually make of it and what it means. So what do these words actually mean? This is another thing, just having clarity over what the words mean to you. Now, I've picked out a few images there of different leaders, and look at them. Every one of them is very different, and they're unique in what they bring as a leader. They're unique in the way that they are as a professional. And in so many ways, this is how we are as leaders. This is how we are as professionals. We are unique in our abilities. And it's to try and understand the skills that we have to just nurture these skills, as opposed to criticizing ourselves for the things that we feel we don't have, because that can really impact on us, because it will make us, I need to do more, I need to do more. And we're constantly trying to do more and more and more and putting this pressure on ourselves. And that can then lead to things like stress, anxiety, depression, eating disorders. There's so many different types of symptoms then that will present themselves as a result of what's going on underneath. So here's Bobby. This is Bobby's inner critic. So this is an example I'm going to use throughout without the presentation. So Bobby grew up in an affluent community of educated professionals who valued academic and athletic achievement. So both his family, his school, and friends emphasized achievement and excellence. And whenever Bobby's performance did not meet the standards of excellence, his family and teachers expressed disappointment. So from these reactions, Bobby concluded that he was inadequate. Since Bobby believed about himself that he was inadequate, he felt anxious in situations that required him to perform, and he started to avoid them. So in some ways, Bobby's not able to be his true self, because now he's finding situations that he thinks is going to cause him anxiety, where he feels like professionals may be, or people that are going to be high achievers are going to be. It's like, I'm not going to go there, because he's feeling that it's going to cause me anxiety. So rather than understanding that anxiety and working with that anxiety, instead what he's doing is using an avoidance technique to stay away from situations that he feels is going to cause him that anxiety. But there's only so much of running you can keep doing from these situations, because he might decide that he's going to change his job, and he ends up in a job, and actually there's people there who are going to be talking academically, for example, and him feeling very out of place, him feeling I'm not good enough, because then his inner critic is coming out and really really criticizing him and saying to him that, hang on 1 minute, like what's going on here? Or sorry, there's someone that's raising their hand, so I got distracted. But yeah, so Bobby's inner critic is saying, like, I'm not good enough. They're talking about they're talking about something that I don't get, and I know that I don't want them to feel disappointed in me. So that's what he's trying to avoid, is the disappointment. So as we go along, so when does the inner critic come out? The inner critic, again, it's a really cute image there. So you drew me all wrong. The inner critic can come out at any point, and often people, when they're stressed, when they feel very tired, it can come out because you're a little bit more vulnerable then. And the inner critic can come out and it can become louder and louder within your day-to-day activities. So the inner critic is always there. And it's never about, I want to get rid of my inner critic. It's always about trying to understand, how am I going to manage this inner critic? Because to get rid of it, it's part of you. It's for some reason, there's something has happened growing up for you where this inner critic has interpreted, I'm not good enough, or I need to be X, Y, and Z. So that's what we're going to try and work on and help you understand today as we go further. So why does the inner critic come out? Now, the inner critic, your inner critic, it reaffirms untruths about yourself that you have internalized to be true. So for example, I'm not clever. Bobby's example is he learned in that situation that I'm not clever like everyone else. So he developed that maybe I'm a belief system that maybe I'm not, I'm dumb. He could be, I'm an idiot, I'm stupid. So he has these really powerful beliefs of how he sees himself in the world. And that then impacts on his ability to get a job, his ability to go to interviews, because in the background, he's got, I'm not good enough going on. And it stems from the beliefs that we hold of ourselves. So in Bobby's example, he has these beliefs. But when I say that, I also want to make a very clear that just because Bobby has them thoughts of not being good enough, he also has thoughts of I am good enough. Because even like, for example, all of you here today, you're on this webinar today, and the fact that you're here shows that you have lots of different thoughts and lots of different belief systems, not just that I'm not good enough. Yes, they come up occasionally. Yes, they will be louder on certain days, but it doesn't mean that that's the only belief system that you have. So it starts from the being. So this is an image. So everything that we have, like our inner critic, it actually comes from the being of the beliefs that we have. And the beliefs that we have, they form from childhood, they form from sort of like traumatic events that may have happened in our lives. And I'll go through that as well in the next few slides. So the way that we behave here is in the doing, and our practices, our skills, ourself, that's in what people can see. But the root of what is going on, that's where our beliefs lie. So the belief, for example, of Bobby, he feels like I'm not good enough. That belief lies underneath. That belief is hidden away. No one can see that. He doesn't portray that to other people. He doesn't go around screaming, I'm not good enough. But instead, he may show something completely different as a tree. So he, like underlyingly, he might feel that actually I'm an orange tree, but then he's showing that he's like a banana tree because he's fearful of people rejecting him or feeling that disappointment that he felt when people see him for who he truly is. So growing up, he learned that it was not okay for him to be the person who wasn't athletic like everyone else, who wasn't academic. Maybe he was more creative, but he never got that space to nurture that creativity. Instead, he was told, you're not good enough because you're not like how his family were. So he then developed a different doing part of him rather than being who he authentically is. So this is where we talk about knowing thyself. And I know what you're going to say. Here we go again. Here there is someone else talking about you've got to do your inner work. You've got to understand yourself. But actually, it is a deep dive into your subconscious. Because what it is we need to go into your subconscious mind and really understand what is going on. There's no point if you've cut yourself, there's no point in just putting a plaster over it. We want to understand what's actually happened underneath and make sure it's not infected. Make sure you're given the right support. And in so many ways, in order for you to make authentic change, it's to go deep into your subconscious mind to truly understand what is going on. So the example with Bobby, if Bobby just keeps avoiding these situations, he's not being authentic to who he is. He's not growing in the capacity that he could grow because he's so fearful of what's going to happen. So then this then takes us to the next one. What will we find? And this is the biggest thing that people have is it's a fear of what am I going to find in my subconscious? I don't even want to go there. It becomes a scary place. And if we keep saying to ourselves, it's a scary place, I don't want to go there. But also you've associated the past with being that disappointed feeling. Why are you going to go back there? Because that door that you open is that disappointment feeling. So you don't want to go back there. But what will happen is Bobby's got that door shut. The disappointment is behind the door and he's got that door shut. But that doesn't mean that things in his life now might come back out and re-trigger that belief system for him. So it might be that actually he decides that he's going for a job interview and he doesn't get the job, and then he asks for feedback and they say, oh, we didn't feel like you got the degree that we wanted. And instantly what happens? That same disappointment that he's got locked behind that door comes back out again, and he's feeling it all over again. And he's like, why am I feeling this way? What is going on? What is happening? And actually what is going on is that he hasn't understood how that disappointment has impacted on his life. He hasn't been able to process that emotion and almost like put it on a shelf, knowing that, okay, it's there, it's fine, rather than trying to shut the door and lock the door away as well with a key. So what will we find? It's a fear. It's a fear of what's going to happen when these emotions come out. And remember, they're emotions that are just trying to communicate something to you. So the disappointment is trying to communicate to Bobby, I'm not content with what I have been through, because I felt like during that time I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't right for my family in that time. So what will we find? And can you see the image here again? I like my little images. So maybe it would be easier if we put this down. And it's again the self-doubt that we're carrying with us. So our thoughts fuel our emotions. And this is the next thing. So we have all these different emotions. So where do these emotions come from? So it's our thoughts that fuel our emotions. So thoughts are the ones that create the feelings, and feelings then become the behavior, and the behavior then reinforces the thought. So I'm going to go into detail with this and give you an example of how this actually works for us. So when we talk about thoughts, it doesn't mean that you're conscious and you're aware of all these thoughts that are going on. You might start to become more conscious when you're feeling the emotion. So when you start noticing like the disappointment feeling, or you notice the panic or the anxiety, that is when you start noticing, hang on, I'm feeling something, what's going on? As opposed to being conscious of the thoughts. And this is where, when I say we're doing like knowing thyself, it's knowing what is going on for you and learning to communicate with your body and what your body is saying. Because we often feel emotions in our body. We often feel emotions in our head as well. And it's trying to understand this. So it starts from our thoughts. Yes, this is what we're going to go diving into. And this is where our inner critic lies as well, within our thought systems. But don't forget, you also feel the inner critic. And what do I mean by this? I mean the physical side. You notice it. So your noticeable effects are like your pupils dilate, your mouth goes dry, your shoulders and neck get very tense, your heart beats quickly. Breathing is fast and shallow as oxygen is needed for muscles, and you start to notice that you get sweaty. Now, have you ever noticed any of them symptoms? Just think back to your experiences. Think back to times where you may have felt this, and especially during this time now with COVID, with the uncertainty. Have you noticed any of these sort of effects coming out for you? And the hidden effects. So your brain gets body ready for action. Your adrenaline's producing. You're getting ready for fight or flight, that's why we feel anxiety the way we do. And then the liver releases glucose to provide energy for muscles, and your blood pressure rises. So there's so many internal processes going on within you. And sometimes it can just be like, you notice the sweatiness, and you're just like, okay, I'm getting really, really sweaty. I need to get out of here. I'm getting really, really hot. I need to go. But not understanding why that's happening. Now, if that keeps happening and you keep avoiding this, the feeling or the sweaty palms or something that happens, you're not understanding what truly is going on. So, for example, if people have they have social anxiety, so every time they're around people, they feel this anxiety that's coming up, and they often say, well, I don't understand why I'm feeling it. And when we go back into it, and it's very different for every individual. Every individual has a different story, and every individual has a different thought process, and feel emotions very differently as well. And that's okay. So it's trying to understand your journey. So if, for example, someone else isn't getting sweaty palms or isn't getting anxiety when they're around big groups of people and you are, that doesn't mean that you're not good enough. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. Instead, it's trying to understand what's going on. And often it can come because there's a fear of judgment, a fear of rejection, a fear of just being accepted. So there's so many deeper processes that are going on for you. So let's move on. So where do our thoughts come from? And this is the really interesting bit now. This is where we go into our subconscious. So let me give you an example. This is an example of you're at work. So Bobby's at work and he hears a loud noise. Now, can you see the trigger here is the loud noise? So the situation is he's just at work Let me give you a little bit more context though into it. So he's at work and he's working late. So he's in the office, which feels like very, I know that we can't imagine that right now, but let's think back to when we were in the office. So he's in the office. It's 7 o'clock at night, and no one's usually in the office at this time. So it's 7 o'clock at night and he's thinking, I'm going to get all this work done. And when I get all this work done, then I can go home. But then the trigger is a loud noise. Now, instantly, there's 3 different ways that he can react. Now, the initial, the first way is, oh my God, there's a patient here. Why is there a patient here? And instantly he feels very frightened. So his feeling as a response to the thought process of, oh my God, there's a client here, is that he feels quite frightened. Now, different people might react differently. Someone else might not get frightened. Someone else might get irritated. Someone else might get like, just be really calm about it. Like, oh yeah, there's just a patient here. But we're going with what Bobby's feeling, and Bobby is feeling very frightened. Like, what? Why is there a client here? So as a result of that, his heart is racing, because what he's doing is getting ready for that fight or flight mode. He's frightened, and his body's trying, his nervous system, his immune system is getting ready for something bad to happen. And as a result, his behavior is he's going to run to this client. He's going to run to find out what this noise is. That's what he's doing. Now, again, in another circumstance, people might hear this noise, they feel frightened, their heart racing, and then they run and hide somewhere. They run to like the bathroom to ring someone and be like, oh my God, there's a noise. And there's another trigger. So the trigger, the loud noise, and another thought process, or another way that Bobby sees this is like, a colleague. Why is there a colleague here? Like, and he feels quite annoyed. He feels annoyed because he's like, why is there a colleague here? Oh, I wanted to just stay here, get my work done, and now there's someone here to just disrupt me, and now I'm not going to get home in time. I'm not going to get to watch my Netflix program in time, even though it's like recorded, but yeah, you get my drift. And then as a result of that, he feels quite tense and quite restless. And then what he does is he ends up shouting at this colleague, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you here? And the colleague's like, whoa, I'm here doing my work. What, like, we share this office? So then can you see how it can impact on the other person, because they're not understanding what's going on for you, but neither are you, because you're not consciously aware of what's going on. Now, another example is there's a loud noise and it's the cleaner, and you feel quite relaxed because you know that the cleaner comes at like 7 o'clock in the evening. You know the cleaner's going to be there. So you feel quite relaxed, physical sensation. You're not getting ready for anything. You feel quite relaxed. You know what's happening. Everything's all under control, and you just carry on and you go back to work. So this is what is going on for us day to day, where we're reacting in different ways. So another example of this is, say if you're going for a walk and a trigger is that your friend walks past you, and you have a thought process like, how dare they? Like, how dare they just walk past me? And as a result, you're feeling quite annoyed. But then someone else might be in that same situation, and that friends walk past them and they're like, oh, well, they probably didn't see me, and it doesn't matter. And they carry on their life. And there might be another person who they're going past, and their friends walk past them, and they're like, see, it's because no one really likes me. I know that no one really likes me, and no one really cares for me. And that's why like people just ignore me like this. So this is showing you just how like experiences around us, it comes from our interpretation. It comes from the way that we're thinking about things, which then influence our feelings. But we're going to go a little bit deeper into this now. A little bit deeper into understanding, well, why is it that one person thinks, well, she's just walked straight past me, how dare she? And another person thinks that, oh, well, it's all right, like she probably just didn't see me. So why can one person be so chilled about it and another person isn't as chilled or gets very angry? So why is that? Why does that happen? So this brings us nicely to the next slide. So this goes a little bit deeper. Now, don't get scared, because there's like this big flow chart in front of you and it looks quite complicated, because actually here, so the behavior, thoughts, physical sensations and feelings, this is what's going on at the bottom. But as you can see, there's loads of different arrows as well. So it doesn't mean that it has to go in the order of the thoughts, the feelings, the physical sensations and the behavior. And it could cross section as well. So that's so it's not just saying that it has to go in that one sort of like chronic, like that one order. It doesn't have to do that. It can just go through, filter through different things. So you might notice that I feel this feeling, then the feeling then influences a thought. The thought then has an impact on you physically. And everyone is very different in how it works. So when we come back to this, then we see the triggering event here. So the triggering event is often just the thing. So for example, with Bobby, it was a loud noise. When your friend walked past, it was the friend walking past you. Now this comes back from our assumptions and life rules. So we might feel like that's really disrespectful that someone just walks past you if they know that they're meant to say hello to you. Even if they don't like you, they're meant to say hello to you. But then it also stems from a deeper core belief of I'm not good enough. So if we then feel like we're not good enough, which comes from our early experiences of, for example, with Bobby, he didn't feel like he was good enough because he didn't fit in with the rest of his family. So he was like, I don't fit in. I'm disconnected with people. I don't feel that sense of belonging. That's what his assumption and life rule is I don't fit in. But his core belief is, again, I'm not good enough. So when, for example, he then finds himself in situations where there's new people, he might get very, very anxious. And the triggering event might be looking at someone's reaction. So you're looking and you're talking to someone, and that individual might be like really like bland looking. Remember, your perception. So you're interpreting that, oh my God, they look really bland. Like they're not, why is it that they aren't responding back to the way that I should be responding? Or maybe I'm doing something wrong here. So instantly what happens is you then start to think that it's because I'm not good enough, because it comes from one of your belief systems of you not feeling worthy, which comes from your early experiences. So that's why with someone else, it might feel like an earlier experience might be that, yes, they were in a household and they did feel that sense of belonging. They did feel like they were connected with their family. They did feel like they received love in the way that they needed to receive love. But also, if you feel like growing up, your early experiences was that you had to suppress your emotions because people around you didn't understand these emotions, or they said you were too sensitive, or they said that you're too emotional. These become core beliefs within us as well, like I'm too much. And again, that makes us feel like I'm not good enough. So constantly then we try and adapt and change the way that people see us around us in order to try and fulfill what they are showing us. And this then has an impact on business, because this has an impact on the way that we lead people, because rather than leading from an authentic place, we're leading to try and get acceptance or try and get approval, because there's that part of us that wants that approval. And this is what then develops into that inner critic, who's constantly just berating you, just constantly screaming at you. And it's just sitting here screaming at you, saying you're not good enough, you shouldn't be doing this, or why are you doing that? And everyone has an inner critic, everyone. I interviewed John Travolta, and I asked him, I was like, how do you manage your inner critic? And he laughed at me. He just laughed in my face, and he said that I don't pay any attention, because I was interested in like how is it that people that are so successful in life, how is it that they manage their inner critic? And the thing is, everyone has an inner critic, but it's how we deal with it on a day-to-day basis, how we manage it on a day-to-day basis. So moving on, so why is it that thoughts matter? So different people, they react very differently to the same situation because they interpret it differently based on their beliefs. So let's go back to this, the belief system here, the core beliefs that we have. Now, if you start identifying some of the core beliefs, like I am good enough, or I am not good enough, I am not worthy, and just thinking back to your childhood, thinking back to your experiences. So for Bobby, it was very, very important for him to go back and understand that disappointment feeling that he felt. So that disappointment made him feel like I'm not good enough. And as a result of that feeling of I'm not good enough, he then found himself just sort of like hiding away from these situations that made him feel very disappointed or uncomfortable. So, but then that can also become like a labeling theory, where he then starts to feel like I'm the dumb one in the family, or I'm the different one in the family, or I think I was the adopted one in the family. And that starts to become your story that you're telling yourself day in, day out. So then you go for a job interview, for example, you don't get that job interview. And then it's like, see, it's because I'm the dumb one. That's why it never works for me. Then you have a relationship, and that relationship doesn't work out the way that you want it to. Then it's like, yeah, see, it's like, it's because I'm the dumb one. And you may not verbalize that to other people, but it's what's going on within you. And as a result, it's like, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that disappointment feeling constantly. I don't want to feel like I'm a failure constantly. So what do? You end up distracting yourself with life. You end up doing lots of different hobbies and interests, and you keep yourself very busy, very, very busy. So by the time it comes to evening, it's like, right, that's it. I'm so exhausted. But the days that you don't exhaust yourself, what tends to happen is that, again, sleep is impacted. So there's that part of you where you're trying to sleep at night, but at night you can't run away from yourself. You can't run away from who you are, because you're there. You can't distract yourself with different things. And then you're thinking, and your mind's just ruminating, and you're thinking of all these different things. and you're like, oh my God, I just want to go to sleep. And then that's where it's like, okay, you know what, just before bed, then maybe if I have a drink, that's going to help me. And you find things to just soothe these emotions. But actually, if by understanding them, it really, really helps you to become more aware of them. And then, so that the first stage is always awareness. After awareness, you go through a stage of understanding. Once you understand, then you can do the doing, and you become more conscious over how you change things. So for example, with Bobby, he, first of all, he just kept avoiding. Then he got to a point where he had to look within himself, and he was like, okay, I understand it. I understand that during my childhood, this is what happened. But it's not blaming anyone either. It's not blaming his parents. It's not blaming other people, because we're not here to blame other people. We're here to understand. We're not saying that his parents are at fault. We're not saying that his teachers are at fault and they should have helped, because then we end up coming from ego, and we end up coming from that blame culture. And we then use the world around us as like, not making excuses. I don't want to say that, but trying to find a reason or a solution to why we are the way that we are without looking within. But that will only work, as I said, it will only work for as long as something else comes up. And then it might be like one of the smallest things. So let me give you an example of someone I had an assessment with. So they came to me and they had a car crash. And after that car crash, they just couldn't, they lost all sense of wanting to work. They ran a very successful business, and they were just like, I can't focus, I can't concentrate. And what happened was, in the accident, when the accident actually happened, they felt very lost. They felt isolated. They felt like, because no one stopped to see if he was okay as well, he felt very rejected. And that brought up so many different emotions for him. And the biggest emotion that it brought up was, I'm not loved. And he wasn't able to focus on work. So when we started working together, it helped him to understand that, hang on, even in business, I'm not loved, but then I keep trying to provide for everyone else. I'm trying to make everyone else's life so much better to try and give them something. But then that in turn is making me feel good, but that's all I'm living for. And if I don't do these things, then I'm not feeling good. So it got to the point where he had the accident, and he said, I'm so thankful as to where I am in life, and that I'm not hurt through this accident, but it's these emotions that keep coming back to me. So when we processed through these emotions and actually went back and understood where else he felt these emotions, they were very powerful for him, because it gave him that opening of what is going on for him. It gave him that understanding of why he is the way that he is. So thoughts matter. Thoughts matter because they stem from our beliefs, and our thoughts can become very automatic, just like with our inner critic. Our inner critic can become very automatic. So you're doing something, you just go into a shop and you're like, oh, hi, are you okay? And then the person might say to you, oh, yeah, you're okay. How was your weekend? And you're just like, yeah. And you walk off. And then afterwards, you're just like, I'm such an idiot. Why did I say that? Why did I say that? I shouldn't have said that. I should have said this. Or when you're trying to talk to someone about business, for example, or you're trying to lead a team, and in that team of people, you might say something by accident, and afterwards you beat yourself up. You're like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. Now, there's a healthy way of doing it, but there's also an unhealthy way of doing it. And the unhealthy way of doing it is when you keep going over these different things that you see as mistakes, these things that you see as failures, because that's what your inner critic is looking for. It's like just sitting there, and it's constantly just looking out for all these different experiences that it can turn around and show you that you're not good enough, because that's one of your belief systems. So your perception of yourself and others, and how you interpret events and situations you find yourself in, strongly influence how you feel and what you do. And that's why I say it's so important as a leader, it's so important in business to really understand your own emotions, to understand how your emotions are influencing. So when I gave you the example of this person who I was working with, they didn't realize that the way that they were being a leader, the way that they were being a business leader and an owner, was they kept trying to provide and keep doing more and more and more for everyone. And yeah, it was working for other people, but ultimately it wasn't working for him. But he fell into this pattern of behavior, as that's what was fulfilling him. That's what was giving him this love. That's what made him feel worthy, gave him value, and made him feel good enough. So noticing your thoughts and understanding your thought processes, they can help you change your mood and your behavior, and influencing decision-making and just your leadership skills and how you are just socially, how you are personally. how you are in relationships, how you are in friendships, because it allows you to be more authentic. It allows you to be just okay with who you are. So next one. So can you see the importance of knowing thyself? It's not just like, oh, you need to go and sit with yourself and do some work with yourself. It's really going deeper. It's really going deeper into understanding your patterns of behavior, your emotions, your mindset, and really mastering yourself. So knowing thyself is really looking at yourself for who you are, not what you think that you should be, not what you think other people want you to be, but what you want, or what feels right authentically for you. Now, how do you change your thoughts? So it's important to write down your thoughts and your reactions to your thoughts. And what I mean by your reactions to your thoughts is, like, for example, you might be feeling that a reaction might be that you're in a group meeting, for example, and someone's asked you a question, and in front of all these different people, you now have to answer this question. But you notice yourself getting all red, you notice yourself getting all sweaty, and that makes you even more panicked in that room, because you're like, everyone's looking at me now and everyone's going to think I'm an idiot. And that's because deep down, that may be something that you're going through or you're feeling. But remember, you're not feeling it all the time, but it comes out at certain points, it will come out. So just by writing these down, and people were like, yeah, I was thinking about it. I'm like, no. Thinking about it is processing your thoughts in a different way. When you're actually physically writing things down, it's completely different way of processing things, because you're seeing it, you're thinking about it, you're writing it, and then you're visually seeing it again. So there's lots of different processes going on during that time. So writing down your emotions, your physical sensations, your behaviors. Now I've got a really good worksheet I can provide you guys. So if you email me at the end, I'm happy to pass that through, where it actually gives you, like, what was the situation, what was the process, like the thought process, what was your emotion, and it just guides you through to help you become more aware. So it enables you to start identifying certain unhelpful thinking styles, which is your inner critic, and to question the beliefs and interpretations that are causing you difficulties. So you might not even realize it's causing you difficulties until you start becoming aware of it, and you start thinking, oh yeah, I do that, or I notice this as well. But just by sitting with yourself or sitting with someone else, having this conversation and really looking at yourself, it will give you these, like, this is why I do this, or this is why I do this. And it's just these light bulb moments going off. And Bobby's inner critic. We come back to Bobby's inner critic. And can you see then how his inner critic can influence on his life? And he can carry on doing what he's doing, avoiding situations and not really living his life to the fullest, but instead feeling that he needs to constantly do for other people, or avoid to protect himself. Ultimately, that's what we're here to do. We're here to survive. And in his way, the disappointment feeling was too much for him. That was the feeling he didn't want to feel again. So he found a way to avoid it. So as a result of that, he didn't want to feel inadequate. And rather than putting himself in these situations, he's just like, I'm not going to do it. So can you see that if he keeps doing that, he's not really growing, he's not developing, he's not understanding. Instead, he's just finding a different route through life. But is that really him being his authentic self? He's capable of so much more, but he's not aware of that at that point in time. So your turn. This is really good to take a picture of. So this is just like questions for each element. So sometimes it's like having like a therapist there. So the situation can be like, what was happening just before I started to feel this way? What was I doing? Who was I with? Where was I? When was it? So imagine Bobby's now with, he's gone out and he's with a group of friends, and he noticed he felt a little bit distressed. So the situation is, what was happening just before he started to feel this way? What was he doing? Who was he with? Where was he? And when was it? Then his thoughts will be like, what's going through my mind at this time? Like, what were my thoughts? What were my images? Did it take me back somewhere? Was I thinking anything in particular? And what did this say or mean about me? What was the worst thing that could have happened? And keep repeating that question over and over again. Because Bobby could have said, the worst thing is that everyone laughs at me. Okay, so what's the worst thing when everyone laughs at you? Then they're all going to think that I'm like a dumbass. Then what? Then what? Then what? So you keep trying to just think of all these different scenarios. Then you look at the emotions. So name the emotion in one word and rate the intensity of it. So low from 0 to high. So you're then now understanding that actually I feel sad, but I have different levels of sadness. So I have the sadness where I feel like it's a 2, but I also have a sadness where it's like, it's really, really strong, and it's like it becomes an 8. But then I have a sadness that's like a 5. So it's you trying to work out and level it up in your head to make sense of it. So the physical sensations then. So what is it that I felt in my body? And this is very powerful, because this is where people don't even realize, like headaches, migraines, all of this can also be a part of a mental, or I don't want to say mental, because there's a stigma attached to that. But what I mean is, by like stress, or if people are having loads of different thoughts, that can then have an impact on like the migraines, the headaches, the back pain, like they might get pain in their stomach. So it's you again learning to understand what your body is saying, learning to understand what is it that your body is trying to communicate with you. So your emotions are communicating one thing, but the physical sensations is what comes after, and it's your body then getting ready for something, because your mind is communicating to the body that we're under pressure, or something bad's going to happen. Very similarly to how we learn, like as a child, you don't know that a lion's dangerous. It's only through like films that you watch, or from people saying like don't do it, and you realize that okay, it's dangerous, because you learn that a lion's dangerous. So you'll obviously avoid a lion unless you are brave. But it's also like with the heater as well. So with kids, you're like, don't touch the heater, don't touch the heater. What is the kid going to do? They touch the heater. And that's where they learn, okay, I've associated the heater is hot, the heater has burnt me. I've realized it's really, really hot, it's painful, it's caused me this distress, so I'm not going to touch it again. So they learn from that. And it's, in some ways, that's what we've learned growing up. We've learned certain experiences that trigger different emotions for us. So then it comes to the behaviors, actions, and urges. So what did I do, and what did I feel like doing? So again, it's like if you're in a conflict situation at work, for example, and what is it that you did? You stayed quiet, but what did I feel like doing? I just wanted to scream out and say something. So it's you trying to understand what are my actions and what are my urges when I'm feeling a certain way. So challenging your inner critic thoughts. So questioning your inner critic thoughts is not about just discarding everything negative, but about getting more of a balanced view by considering all the options. So like I said, we're not trying to get rid of this inner critic, we're trying to make friends with it. And I know people are like, I don't want to make friends with it, it's caused me so much havoc. But it is about trying to make friends with this inner critic. And it's not about rationalizing your negative conclusion, and it is not about seeing everything in a positive light. So you can't always see positive things. And actually, if it wasn't for your inner critic and just mastering this inner critic, you wouldn't be able to find this alignment and really appreciate the alignment that or being authentic. You wouldn't be able to appreciate it as much as you would if you had just fallen into it. So in some ways, the inner critic is showing you what life is like with this, but what life is like managing it as well. And it's about looking for information that you might have overlooked as well. So for example, when with Bobby, he might find that they're talking about something now, and this has just gone over my head, and him feeling like this is causing me too much anxiety. But he's already just thinking that he doesn't know what they're talking about or how to engage in that conversation. Instead, it's like looking at like how the message is overlooked. But these people want him to be part of this conversation. These people aren't there to make him feel stupid or make him feel crap about himself. These people want him to be part of this conversation, and they might ask him what his views are. So sometimes it's overlooking and not going back into that little boy that he was once. Instead, it's looking at the bigger picture. So this is a checkout now. So we do not have to fit into a mold of what we think we need to be an effective leader. Find your fit. So like I showed you at the beginning, all them different images, find what fits for you. Don't feel that you need to be something else. Don't let this inner critic show you that you need to be like this and you need to be like this, because you are who you are, and it's embracing the person who you are and really feeling comfortable with who you are. So it's our interpretation of a situation, not the situation itself, that affects how we feel and what we do. And our thoughts, emotion, physical sensations, and behaviors, they all interact with each other and they affect one another as well. So our thoughts can reflect the beliefs we hold of ourselves and affect what we do and what we feel that we are able to do. So again, with Bobby, he wasn't able to reach his full capability because he kept trying to avoid this other part of him. And we can work at changing how we feel by reevaluating our thoughts and trying out new behaviors to gain a more balanced view of ourselves, others, and the world. So it is going back into our belief systems and really working from them belief systems of, okay, if one of my assumptions of life or one of my life rules is that people are unsafe, because that's what you've been through in life, is trying to challenge that and understand, okay, once upon a time in my life, people were unsafe. You learned that people were unsafe, but not everyone is unsafe. And you're learning this new way of being, and it's trial and error. So in some ways, it's a lifestyle change. And to finish there, I just want to say, it's time to stop being your own worst enemy. You're an amazing human being. You just need to stop listening to that inner critic that tells you otherwise, that you're not good enough. Remember, the inner critic is there to try and protect you, because once upon a time you felt a feeling that your inner critic couldn't deal with. And in so many ways now, your inner critic just wants to avoid that feeling again. So it tries everything to just control you. But you're better than that, and you don't need that inner critic to take over. So if you have any questions, you can contact me on my email address. You can contact me through my website, and I'll get back in contact with you. So on that note, Chloe, are we there?
Thank you so much, Dr. Lolita. That was a great session. We've had lots of questions come in through the live chat, so let's have a look at some of them. The first one: whilst working from home, I'm struggling to separate my workspace from my personal life. What do you suggest?
Okay, I would definitely suggest having a routine. I've spoken to a few clients about this, and the routine has worked really, really well. So start the day. Don't get up in the morning and jump straight into work. Try and have that break. So even if it is to get up in the morning, go for a walk. Once you've gone for a walk, you come back, because in some ways what you're doing is you're recreating that the travel side of things. So when you used to travel to work, you're recreating that. So you're like, okay, right, come back home, get into work mode. Don't work in your PJs. Try and have that that distinction between, okay, this is my working time and this is my personal life. When work is over as well, you put work away. Don't feel like you're going to blur the boundaries just because you're at home and you think, actually, I'll do that later on, or I'll do that from the sofa while I'm watching my film. You have that clear time of, okay, this is my working time. This is my personal and my time for myself. And always try and do something good for yourself as well, like something of self-care every day. That will help you to be like, okay, and it's something to look forward to as well every day.
That links in very nicely with the next question, which is, what are your top tips of being able to switch off from the working day?
Okay, well, I would say my top tips: going for a walk, going for a run, doing something physical, but also switching off your mobile phones, your work mobile phone, switching off your work emails, notifications on your phone. Don't have them going on all the time, because you're constantly being not irritated, that's the wrong word, interrupted, I meant. You're constantly being interrupted, and you're not then really getting to just switch off completely, because you've got this going on or this going on. And also, don't keep yourself so busy. Like, sometimes it's okay. Don't feel like just because we're coming out of lockdown, like, I need to meet this friend and I need to meet this friend, and again, become very, very busy. Give yourself that time as well in the evenings, where it's like, okay, this is my time to read a book. This is my time to do some yoga. This is my time to listen to a podcast, whatever it is that feels right for you. And again, it's trial and error of finding things that you feel like it brings you enjoyment. But definitely the notifications, don't have your notifications on. But also then having that distraction and doing something physical. Because if you're sitting in front of a laptop all day, or if you're sitting like on Zoom calls all day, it's not healthy, because you're not doing the other bits and pieces as well of physically moving your body. So mind and body work very well together.
The next one is from Jenny. Can you tame your inner critic fully?
So when we talk about tame, it's like the inner critic is like a beast, isn't it? And we want to just try and get rid of it. I would say that we can manage our inner critic, and there's times where our inner critic will come out when we're vulnerable. And when I say vulnerable, when we're tired, when we're sleepy, when we've had like a relationship breakdown, when we feel very overwhelmed, our inner critic will be there. And the inner critic will constantly be around, but it's how you then manage it. So it's always coming back down to, how are you going to communicate? It's like having a child who's always having tantrums next to you, and how are you going to manage this child within you who is having these tantrums? But remember as well, the inner critic is just trying to protect you. It's just trying to look after you, to make sure that you're not in a situation where once it was very difficult for you. So once you learn to understand, in some ways you're communicating with it. So you're not having to like force it to stop being there. You're understanding, and you're working with it, as opposed to trying to work against it and get it into a room and lock it away, because you want to try and understand it.
The next question has come through saying, what does Dr. Lolita think of the phrase, do the thing you fear to do and the fear will disappear?
So what I say is, fear is like false evidence appearing real, isn't it? That's what they say. And with fear is trying to understand what fear means to you. So what was the saying again? Sorry.
I just find it for you. It was, do the thing you fear to do and the fear will disappear.
okay, I don't think the fear will disappear, but what you'll find is you'll understand more. So it's like, for example, there's a book, isn't there? There's a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. But what that's saying to you, or if you read that book, it's actually saying to you, do it. Don't let fear control you and feel like you can't do it. So it's like, right, okay, I'm scared of spiders. So when you're scared of spiders, it's like, right, let's just bring in something that looks like a spider to start with. Then we bring in something smaller. Then we bring in something smaller. And eventually you get a spider in front of you. And that's showing you that you're building up that sense of understanding what that fear means to you, but also dealing with the physical sensations. So when we say like, oh, the fear is going to disappear, the fear won't, I don't think the fear is going to disappear. No, the fear won't disappear. It's you understanding that that fear is not controlling you anymore. Because say if you're like, oh, if I leave the house now, I might catch coronavirus. Now you're never going to leave the house. And by you not leaving the house, you're not living the life that you want to live. So in some ways it's you understanding, first of all, what that fear is. When did the fear start for you? What is the fear as well? What is the fear? Is it a rational fear? Is it an irrational fear? So it's very sort of like individualized again in what we mean by that.
The next question is from Julia. Do you think that too much engagement on social media impacts on how your inner critic affects you?
I think that it depends on who you're following, and I think it depends on how you're interpreting it. And also having healthy amounts of social media. So not just every time you get a break at work, it's like, right, let me just scroll through social media. Or every time you feel like at the end of the day, you just want to chill out and it's like, right, let me just jump on TikTok, let me just jump on Instagram. And before you know it, all your hours and all your time has gone. Because what might be happening in that time is you're then seeing a world outside and you're saying, God, look, she doesn't even like, she's got all these amazing TikToks, she's got all these likes, she's got all these amazing followers, and look at like how she dresses and look at her hair, and look, she's just gone to the hairdressers today, because you're watching people's stories. So in some ways, yes, it can be negative, but also it can be positive because it helps you to connect with people. But it's having a healthy balance with anything. It's having a healthy amount of it and not feeling overwhelmed with it, but also being conscious of it when you are on social media. Be conscious of what inner critic is saying. So is inner critic comparing your life with other people's lives, or is an inner critic basically just belittling you because they're bigging up everyone else on social media? So it's being conscious of what is going on for you.
The next question is from Matt. As a business owner, what steps and activities should I provide to my staff to help with their mental health?
Okay, so he's a business owner, did you say?
Yeah, a business.
Yeah, okay. So there's lots of different services out there where people can, like, again, it's like the mind, body, and the nutritional side, where people are coming in and they're offering this support. It's something that actually we offer and I'm part of, where to employees that are struggling at home, or they're in the transition of going back into work, they need some support. They need support from just the mindset side, but also physically. What are they doing physically? So in some ways it's giving them, I would say give meetings, even if it's through webinars, where you're engaging, something very similar to what we've done today, where you're giving them tips, you're giving them tools in how to manage their emotions, how to deal with their food side of things, how to deal with their, like doing yoga or doing like PT sort of like sessions. So it varies depending on what business it is, but also it varies on what your employees are like, where they're at the minute, if they are in work or if they are working from home. And yeah, just having regular check-ins with them as a business owner as well. I think that's really important, and letting them know that you care, letting them know that you're available as well. And obviously if it's out of your depth, that's when you bring in professionals into the business and you allow these professionals to take over, rather than you feeling very overwhelmed with it as well.
Daniel has asked, by practicing self-awareness, do you think it is possible to change core beliefs? And if so, how long do you think that might take?
So how long is a piece of string? I know when I say that, people are just like, they're ready to punch me, because they're like, just how long is it going to take? And I'm like, you have to trust the process. Everyone's very different. Everyone's different. Sometimes people are like, bam, 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 and they get it and it makes sense and that's it. They're off. Sometimes people may still need to go back through their traumatic events. They need to go back and process certain things that have gone on in their life to be able to make sense of it. So through self-awareness, you can manage that inner critic. Through self-awareness, the more aware you are, the more that you're not running away from yourself, the more that then you can understand yourself and you're communicating with yourself. And that's also so important in how then you communicate with others, because say if like you're in a business meeting, for example, and someone else is sitting on the table and they've said something, and in some ways it's made you feel really, really low about yourself or really crap about yourself. And instead you've attacked them back and you've said something that is very inappropriate, but you wouldn't normally say. And in some ways after, you're like, oh my God, why did I say that? But by you having and going through that experience and understanding that level of like what happened during that point for me, what went on for me. So in some ways, self-awareness, it's always a growing experience where we're never going to get to a point where we've mastered everything in life, because in life you keep learning through different experiences, and through putting yourself in different experiences, you'll learn different things about you. And there's a really powerful saying around different people awaken different parts of you. So you might find that there's someone completely new that you've met, you bumped into, and the way that they've just looked at you has really triggered something for you and made you feel really uncomfortable. But it's not about them. It's not about them and what they've done. It's what's going on for you. So it's always that you're learning. So self-awareness it's an ongoing journey.
The next one is from Nusrath. Any recommendations for further reading?
Yeah, if you saw my book collection, you'd be like, what? So I have this is Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. That's a really good book. I would also recommend this. It's Lost Connections. Really, really, really powerful book. I can send out like a link if you want of all these different books. But also this one, I don't know if you read this, the Chimp Paradox. Really, really good book as well. And again, it talks around the inner critic. But I can give you also evidence-based work or journals where it can lead you into understanding more around how emotions, how the science behind it basically, and how we work. So there's books, there's novels, things that I can recommend, but there's also evidence-based journals. So I'm happy to share that. Chloe, I don't know how we can do that, but I'm sure we can think of something.
Yeah, we can come up with something to send out after the webinar. The next one is from Esther. I feel overwhelmed by my fears to change my career, and this puts pressure on me. I find myself searching for different options, but deep down, I know my area of strength. How can I begin to manage this and narrow down to this strength?
So when you say you know your area of strength, I'd write that down on a piece of paper. What is the strength? See it, look at it, understand what it feels like when you're looking at it. But on another piece of paper, write down your fears, write down what are the things that are holding you back, or the fears that you have of changing to this career. Because like you said, you deep down, you know what you want and what is stopping you but these fears. And often when we break down these fears, they can be very irrational. And it might be that you're fearful because there's part of you that feels like, well, if I make this choice, it's going to be my fault in the end. Or if I make this choice, what are people going to think about me? Or I've worked so hard to be where I am right now, and how are other people going to interpret then that I'm just completely going off doing something different? Or will people still like me? Or that how are my colleagues or everyone else going to see me if I just leave this job because I've been working really hard? So again, it's just taking that step back and starting with your fears. Like, what are these fears? Let's list them down. Let's work through them. Let's understand them. Let's make sense of them. And even if you put down the fear of, I think my colleagues they're not going to accept me anymore. So you're writing that down and you're saying, well, why does that matter? So you've got another question now that you're asking the fear. So in some ways you're seeing the fear like a separate part of you. And often the fear can come from inner critic as well. Because again, the inner critic wants to protect you, and the inner critic doesn't want you to be in a situation where you're feeling like something bad can happen. So in some ways it's like, oh no, we don't want to go to that job. We don't want to go to that job. And maybe it's because you've made a decision in the past and that decision hasn't worked out right for you. And as a result, you're living with that shame and that guilt of making that decision. And now that's being projected onto this choice and this decision that you're making, because you're like, I don't believe in myself to be able to make this decision. So let's write everything out. And then from there, moving forward, trying to again understand it. And then you can do the doing of making that move of doing something that you're living, that you want to do, that you know is going to bring you happiness and joy.
Charlotte asks, what sort of situations can you examine? Could you look into procrastinating from applying for a new job?
Yeah, so procrastination is, again, it's avoidance, isn't it? So when we're avoiding things, it's just trying to understand what is it that we're trying to avoid. So by you understanding, okay, there's this job that I want, I say I want it, but yeah, I'm cooking, I'm cleaning the cupboards, I'm looking after other people's kids, I'm making, jelly. So whatever it might be, what you're doing is, why are these things so big for you? But also it's trying to understand your personality, because sometimes people work better under pressure, and maybe it's not under that point, that perspective right yet, where you are under pressure and you have to do it. So it's trying to work out you as a person as a whole, understanding how you behave, why you are the way you are, and then understanding why you're preventing yourself from taking on this job, if that's something that you really want, because maybe you're sabotaging because it's not something that you really want. So that's, there's so much there to look at.
And we'll end on this question from Siraj. Can we use the inner critic as a launch pad to grow and succeed? If so, how?
Yes, we can. So the inner critic, as I said, there's so much value there for us. There's so many different questions. So with Tom, for instance, Tom was doing what he thought he needed to do, but he wasn't living to his full extent. Instead, he was listening to what the inner critic was saying. So the inner critic was like, oh, my partner's going out tonight, but she's going out with them people that are like really, really clever. So I'm not going to go with them. So he avoided going out. But actually, by going there, engaging in these conversations, really stepping out of his comfort zone and learning, that's where, like they say, the magic happens, because he's growing and he's learning. And if at a point where he feels uncomfortable, he's then reflecting back and being like, okay, that person said this, what was going on for me then? What was happening for me then? So you're growing. So next time you're in a situation like that, you can turn around and you can be like, right, okay, this is what happened last time. And you're aware, you're so much more aware. And this is where change will happen, because you're consciously going to change the way that you are now in a different situation. So just like with Tom, he's learning that, okay, these things stress me out. So he's then engaging in these things because he's understood them. He knows what's happened. So now he's testing the theory behind it. So he's gone into these situations and he's like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. Or actually this is when it causes me distress. So he's learning his triggers. So by understanding his triggers, he's then able to grow and then to succeed, because he might feel like, actually, I want to grow and I want to be a teacher, and I want to be able to sort of implement into students the pain point within him, which was that he didn't have that belief system or he didn't have that nurturing environment where people cared and allowed him to be who he wanted to be. So now he feels like very strongly about this, and that's taken him to the success of being that teacher and bringing his passion into the work that he's doing. So success will come from the different, from your pain points in some ways, and you becoming more aligned with yourself. So you're understanding, and there's no running away.
That is all the questions we have time for. Dr. Lalitha, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure our audience would agree that was a fantastic session. Do you have any final words before we sign off?
I just want to say, just stop being your own worst enemy, and really just look in the mirror at who you are, because you're an amazing person. Even if your inner critic says you're not, just try and make friends with that inner critic, because that inner critic isn't a bad person. It's just trying to protect you.
I've included a link in the chat to Dr. Lalitha's website, email address, and also a link to her webinar page. So from 5 o'clock today, you'll be able to find a replay of the webinar, the fact sheet that Dr. Lalitha mentioned, and the list of recommendations for books. We'll include everything on that page from 5 p.m. today. Our next webinar in the Lockdown Learning for Business series takes place on Monday, the 20th of July at 2 p.m. with Cheryl Miller, as she discusses a post-COVID world calls for a more authentic kind of leadership. If there is anything you'd like to catch up on from today's session, the replay will be available from 5 p.m. today. You can find this and any future webinars on www.freshbusinessthinking.haysummit.com or by clicking on the link in the comments. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you again, Dr. Lalitha.
Thank you. It's been lovely to be here. Take care.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.